My name is Professor Dog. I'm going to teach you today about drama and pop culture and drug addiction. Anyway, so spring break is over and we have to do things again. I know it's terrible, isn't it? Let's make sure we get the dog in the picture because this is one of those stories that can be kind of depressing. So if we got the dog, I think we can make it through. So we've already talked at length about Long Day's Journey into Night. You smell something over there, don't you? What's over there? Ain't nothing over there. So we talked a little bit about the selfishness, the weird circle of abuse that seems to be going on in this very unfortunate family. So now I want to end our discussion of Long Day's Journey into Night and talk a little bit about the legacy that it left behind. Now, I say this about a lot of plays that occurred in this style. When I talk about Long Day's Journey into Night, I like to refer to it as one of the domestic tragedies. And a domestic tragedy is basically just a play that seems to take place in one room and is a family slowly destroying itself. Usually for a lot of different reasons. Okay, he's miserable. I'm going to put him on the floor. Oh, come here. He says, y'all listen up close. You know what he talking about. And there's going to be stuff on here that's going to be on the final. You got kisses? You got kisses? Come on. He's mad because I yelled at him for pooping on the floor earlier. You're petty. Look at that. Come on. All right, go lay down on your pillow. So, what do I mean when I talk about the legacy of Long Day's Journey into Night? Well, the domestic tragedies, which I include with Death of a Salesman, a little bit further back, but the Ibsen plays like Doll's House, Hedda Gabler, all these plays where the family is kept in a kind of weird cosmic petri dish, only to basically just cannibalize itself over time. I see these plays as the foundation of the sitcom. That's going to be a little bit of a controversial statement, but you'll notice as I teach, I like to take controversial stances on things. I like to work out with some really crazy ideas. And this one is, I think I can substantiate it. Because, a lot of times when I'm reading papers from students, it's always people talking about things, from such a clinical standpoint. You guys are like, there's feminist imagery inside this story. You can see it here, here, and here. Now, to be fair, I'm not picking on you too much because I asked for that paper, right? I got what I asked for. But this idea is something I've been cooking on for a while. Sitcoms, and I realize more and more now that I actually have to explain what a sitcom even is. People don't seem to watch sitcoms the way they used to. Sitcoms are situational comedies. They don't always involve family units, but a lot of times they do. Sitcoms are shows like, there's been tons and tons of them throughout the years, but I immediately think of Family Matters, the show with Steve Urkel. I think of Full House. Everybody Loves Raymond. There's a lot of these, and they vary in degrees of maturity and, honestly, quality. But situational comedies typically, are directed in a way that is very reminiscent of old drama. They have a very regular set. And a lot of times these sets take place in a family home. There's a live audience. And the thing that's really being depicted in sitcoms is relationships themselves, the ways that they thrive, the ways they break down, the way problems are explored and either solved or whatever. In the American sitcom, we play a lot of things off for laughs. And that produces what I think is one of the absolute biggest tragedies in pop culture history, and that is the laugh track. When you have the audience that's laughing along, oh my God, it's awful. It's just brutally awful. And a lot of times you can kind of get a sense of how these family-oriented sitcoms connect to things like Long Day's Journey into Night, because when you look back, at Long Day's Journey, imagine a show like Everybody Loves Raymond. If you've never seen Everybody Loves Raymond, do yourself a favor and look up a couple of clips of it. I remember watching Everybody Loves Raymond with my family, and it's hard to call Everybody Loves Raymond a sitcom when there were some very mature themes that played out on Everybody Loves Raymond. But that show depicted some of the unhealthy relationships I've ever seen in my entire life. The doting intrusiveness of the parents, the doting on Raymond, the main character, as the baby, the emotional abuse of the father, and kind of the torn and tattered rapport between the laugh track. And a show like that, where most of the comedy is derived from characters behaving badly and just being unpleasant and awful to each other, it turns into Long Day's Journey into Night. Without that laugh track to tell us what's supposed to be funny, what's supposed to be played off for laughs, and what's not, it's really easy to see those shows as tragic. They derive from that. And it's actually quite unsettling to see it in action. And one of the other weird kind of artifacts of this also is that for American comedy, and I'm going to go a little bit outside of the family sitcom zone here, let's also think about Seinfeld and Friends. The majority of the comedy that comes from Friends and Seinfeld, and you can project this into Everybody Loves Raymond as well, and maybe even some of the more family-oriented sitcoms, most of the laughs are derived from the fact that you are watching people who are terrible, people who are acting like aggressive monsters to their friends and everyone around them and their family. Seinfeld is probably my favorite example of this because Seinfeld seems to be aware of this as they play with it. Each of the characters are so aggressively awful that the end of the series actually has every single character end up in prison, not for any specific thing they did wrong, but just the collective awfulness of all of them put together. And it's something that you might not even really think about as you're watching the show, because you kind of get accustomed to these characters. You grow to like these characters because of their flaws, which make them, kind of relatable to us. Now, Friends is very interesting about this as well. I know so many people who like Friends, and they've completely missed the point that every single person on Friends is horrible. They are all terrible. Just mind-blowingly horrible people. Like, it was an article on Cracked a long time ago. Again, I need to be better about citing my sources. I'm a bad example for you guys. But if you go back and you watch episodes of Friends, you'll even notice some kind of hint, little tiny hidden things that hint towards just how awful all these characters are. Just follow with me for a minute. That couch in the coffee shop that's constantly depicted in the show Friends, that's prime real estate in New York. Brush this off a little bit. It's fantasy. It's not meant to be analyzed this closely. Except it is, because if you look at the little table in front of the couch, there's always this sign that says reserved. Who is the couch reserved for? It's reserved as why? Why is this couch always reserved for them? It's never explained. That sign is always there. What do they do to have this awesome place in the coffee shop always set aside for them? Rachel, well, Gunther, the guy who works at the coffee shop, is head over heels in love with Rachel. Nothing ever happens between the two of them. But we can pretty much assume that Gunther, the coffee shop employee, always has that couch reserved for this group of people. Why? Because he's in love with Rachel and he's trying to do things for her to get her to like him back. She's never going to like you back, Gunther. She's been with so many other people and she's never, ever, ever going to give you any attention whatsoever. She is a terrible person. And you know what? Maybe it does kind of aggravate me for Gunther because I was Gunther for a long time. But there's all sorts of these little hints, all sorts of these little themes that run throughout the American sitcom that go right back to this play. Well, maybe not this play in particular, but the plays like this. Now, think for a minute if you added a laugh track to Long Day's Journey into Night. You could turn this into an incredible comedy, a dark, awful comedy, but it would be funny as hell. Like, think about when Tyrone, the father Tyrone, is sitting there like, none of this would have happened if you'd never been born, Edmund. It would work so well. It's absolutely amazing. Now, tragedy is always a few weird inflections away from comedy anyway. And you'll notice in this play, there's a lot of bits that are played for laughs. The way that they make fun of Tyrone, the weird double entendres around Mary's drug use, not sexual double entendres, but just the fact that, when she's going upstairs and she's talking about how unpleasant things are, and he's like, yeah, it's a real shot in the arm. These things left a legacy. These plays, these tragedies left this weird legacy where we do obsess over character flaws. They're the only things about characters. Me, I would love to write a paper about the potential connections here because I see so many of them. And here's another thing too. Long Day's Journey into Night is dealing primarily with a social issue that was causing a lot of anxiety at the time. Well, actually, it's dealing with like 3 or 4. And that, of course, is drug use and alcoholism. Do you know how many people died from alcoholism back when this play was written? Before they had really good treatment programs? Before they had like detox and rehab centers that had any remote idea how to actually treat people with these types of problems? It was everywhere. It was rampant. It was awful. So reason prohibition lasted in this country as long as it did, because it was a real health crisis at that point. People were dying of this. Consumption is kind of the same way. People had tuberculosis on the mind. So these plays often dealt with a lot of the social crises that were going on in their time period. Now, here's the last comment I'm going to make about sitcoms. I'm going to leave Vonnegut because I really want to talk about some Kurt Vonnegut. I hear my child screaming at the top of his lungs, so that's my little hint that I need to wrap this up. When you go back to 90s sitcoms, even the really fluffy, gentle, nicey nice ones like Full House, Step by Step, going back even further, My Three Sons, some of the really old ones. One of the weirdest themes that you see cropping up all the time is the single father raising children alone. This is so unbelievably common. This trope pops up over and over and over again. Single father raising the children, playing it off for laughs, right? Dad doesn't know how to be a dad. Hijinks ensue. Will the kids survive? Do you know why they did that? And it's funny because take Full House, for example. The mom died, right? The mom is dead. The reason that she's not there is because she's been removed from the equation. And the dead mother trope is shockingly consistent. Something's happening that's killing all the moms, right? Why is this as persistent as it is? Well, no fault divorce was introduced in this country, I believe, in the 1960s. No fault divorce. When you think about how long we've had no fault divorce, it's actually kind of shocking. It used to be in this country that you couldn't get divorced unless you could prove some type of fault with the person that you were with. You needed to have like a justification for it. There was no mutual dissolution of a marriage. Somebody had to do something terrible in order to end it. Most of the time, you could get out of a marriage if you proved adultery, right? Infidelity was a good way of doing that. But you couldn't just end a marriage because you wanted to. Something had to break a marriage apart. Now, the 60s comes along, and you have the sexual revolution, you have a lot of stuff changing. And then all of a sudden, people can get divorced just because they wanted to. It wasn't as difficult as it used to be. This actually scared the ever-living bananas out of most religious thinkers. They were afraid that the dissolution of marriages without fall, was going to destroy the American family utterly. You still see language like this to this day, that the family is under attack in America. What are we going to do to defend the family, right? That is such a common idea. I hear it all the time. And I'm like, where's the supervision? I kind of get it, right? Now, the other big side of this is the fact that there was a new horror lurking over the horizon in the advent of no-fault divorce. And that is the raising a family without a mother. Only mothers really understood how to raise children. And so what's the word I'm looking for here? The big fear was that fathers were basically gonna like murder their children or something, or like accidentally cook them or sell them for magic beans. People did not think very much of the parenting skills of the father. Now, to deal with this, a lot of these sitcoms put dads in the parental role, introduce the comedic hijinks that comes along with a unsupervised male parental figure. And what was the goal of these shows? To show that the family would survive, that dad's gonna figure it out, right? It's gonna be okay. We're gonna get through this whole divorce thing. Men can raise children without trying to bake them into pies. Like, it was a real anxiety. It's funny. I ran into this issue, not hiding for our lives, but going to the supermarket, and somebody looks at me with my sons, and they're like, looks like somebody doesn't have mama today. Is everything going all right? And I'm like, yeah, it's going to be a wild and crazy day, but just like those funny characters from Full House, daddy's going to make it work. Woohoo. These people are basically assuming I can't parent my children. Eyes, you jerk. Anyway, these plays started as tragedies, but it's amazing how similar they are to the sitcoms that would eventually come around and allow us to explore the more broken parts of the family unit in a more kind of cushy, gentler atmosphere. They have so much in common with each other, these domestic tragedies and these sitcoms. The family being the focus, the faults of the family, the places where the family's breaking down. And I think the only difference between a sitcom and Long Day's Journey into Night is that there is hope. It's kind of funny because in a sitcom, one of the most popular ways for a sitcom to end is for two characters to get married. So we actually have kind of a repeat of the same tropes from all those years ago. Literature, it doesn't repeat itself, but it very much rhymes. Where have you seen in pop culture? You can go to the sitcom if you want, although they are not as popular as they used to be. My sons and I watched The Big Show on Netflix today. It's gushy and it's wholesome in a real saccharine, like, ugh kind of way. But it's not without its charms, especially for someone like me who grew up watching sitcoms. But think of a show. And think about not just the weird connection it might have with Long Day's Journey into Night. What societal problem is it trying to help us work through? What are we exploring in that show? I want you to keep to a TV show because this is ultimately a conversation about drama. And TV now is the primary way that we experience drama. It's the way that it's packaged for us. So I gave you Everybody Loves Raymond. I gave you Full House. There's so many of these stupid things. Just give you some other ones. Modern Family. There's a lot of societal issues that are being played out in Modern Family. Family Guy. Family Guy is a good one because, believe it or not, since these sitcoms, since these plays, these shows often spearhead some form of controversy because society is having problems with it. There's a lot of different ways you could explore this. One of those was called The Very Special Episode. Oh my God, these things were terrible. In the 90s, where you have something like Punky Brewster or something, and Punky Brewster accidentally comes home with like a crack pipe or something like that. It's like, Punky, where did you get the heroin? There were so many of these things. But they often end up spearheading controversy for some weird reason or another. Family Guy got its whole shtick just from spearheading controversy after controversy in a way that was so aggressive that it became itself farcical and actually dulled it and actually did a really good job of getting us to confront some very uncomfortable things. Anyhow, The Simpsons is an excellent one. All of these, I want you to stop and I want you to think, what sitcom, what show have you noticed that is trying to work through some type of disturbing or societal issue? Right? How is it? It doesn't have to offer us solutions, but they do typically offer us emotional avenues to cope with it. That's all I've got. Take care of yourself, cats and kittens.